Hey there! Manta-Ray79 here, and I'm back with another deck profile video for the Cardfight Vanguard trading card game. In today's video, the deck profile I'm going to be doing one for is D standard formats, Dragon Empires, Dragonic Overlord with cards from D-BT07, Raging Flames against Emerald Storm. Alrighty then, let's get started. And now for the ride deck. For the cards in this ride deck, we have Grade 0, Lizard Runner Undu, Grade 1, Embodiment of Armor Bar, Grade 2, Dragonite Nehalem, and Grade 3, Dragonic Overlord. The Grade 0 starting unit, Lizard Runner Undu. Like any other starting unit in the D standard format, he features only one skill. When rated on top of, if you're the second to go to Grade 1, you get to draw a card. The Grade 1, Embodiment of Armor Bar. His skills are, the first skill, as a Vanguard, when rated on top of by Dragonite Nehalem, by paying a counter blast of 1, if the cost has been paid, you may search your deck for any Grade 1 unit and add it to your hand. So ideally, this first skill will allow you to add maybe a Perfect Guard or any other Grade 1 that's mainly used for your deck's later game strategy. The Grade 2, Dragonite Nehalem. His skills are, the first skill, when ridden on top of by an Overlord, you may move Nehalem from your soul to the rear guard. So if this first skill, as long as you manage to ride an Overlord like Dragonic Overlord or Dragonic Overlord the end on top of Nehalem, you'll be able to secure yourself a rear guard Nehalem whose second skill will support your Vanguard Overlord later in the game. The Grade 3, Dragonic Overlord. His skills are, the first skill, as a Vanguard or a rear guard, whenever it attacks an opponent's rear guard, the attack cannot be blocked by your opponent with any cards in their hand. So with this first skill, you can more or less have a almost absolute attack on any opponent's rear guard, since your opponent cannot use any cards from their hand to guard with. And the second skill of Dragonic Overlord, as a Vanguard, once per turn, after this unit's attack hits, you may counterblast 1 and discard a card from your hand. If the cost has been paid, you may restand your Vanguard Overlord with the additional cost of reducing your Vanguard's drive check by 1. So with the second skill, it's more or less a standard restanding ability for the Dragonic Overlord series. And with that, we've just about covered the deck's ride deck. Next, let's get on to the main deck. And now for the Grade 1 lineup. For the Grade 1s of this deck, we have 3 Drag Ritter Midhats, 4 Drag Ritter Halbs, 3 Twin Buckler Dragons, and 1 Blitz Order Elementaria Sanctitude. The Grade 1 Drag Ritter Midhat. Its skill is, as a rear guard, during your turn, whenever your Vanguard restands by a card effect, you may retreat Midhat from your own rear guard. If the cost has been paid, you can draw 1. So for Midhat, he's more or less a supporting card for decks that specialize in restanding your Vanguard, like the Dragonic Overlord series. As long as you don't mind retreating him from your own rear guard, you'll be able to restock your hand with more cards for either to guard your opponent's attacks in their turn or to give yourself more options to work with during your next turn to attack your opponent and to possibly finish them off, making Midhat a great card to have for both offensive and defensive purposes for the Dragonic Overlord series. The Grade 1 Drag Ritter Halt. Its skills are, the first skill, when this card will be discarded for the cost of your Vanguard with Overlord in its card name ability, it may be regarded as 2 cards. So as for Halt, if you play a Dragonic Overlord deck that requires you to discard cards in your hand as a cost, Halt can reduce the number of cards you need to discard by being counted as 2 cards, making it a good way to conserve your hand for defensive purposes, to guard your opponent's attacks, or to give yourself more options to work with, like having more cards to using your next turn to attack. And the second skill of Dragritter Halt, when this card is discarded from your hand for the cost of a Dragonic Overlord skill, you may superior call it from the drop zone to your back row rearguard circle. If called by its own skill, it gets plus 5,000 power until the end of the turn. So as for the second skill of Halt, it works together with its first one. After being discarded for a Dragonic Overlord skill cost, you can superior call him to your back row to serve as a 13,000 power booster from the back row, making Halt a good way to discard from your hand for hand cost, and also to give yourself more powerful attacks by serving as a powerful booster from the back row. The Great One, Twin Buckler Dragon, Perfect Guard, Sentinel. Just like any other Perfect Guard in the Cardfight Vanguard trading card game, it features the same skill and activation. When used to guard with, you may discard one card for the cost, then the attack that Twin Buckler is guarding against will be completely blocked. But it also features a second ability. When used to guard with, if you have less than 2 cards in hand, then you will not have to pay any hand cost to do a Perfect Guard, making a potential no-cost defense card as a last resort. And the Blitz Order, Elementaria Sanctitude. Its skill is, if your opponent has triple drive, this ability can be played without paying the cost. And the second skill, when used to guard with, you may discard one card from your hand. If your Vanguard is grade 3 or less, then choose one of your units. It cannot be hit until the end of the battle. After this card is used, remove it from play. So this Blitz Order more or less serves as a Perfect Guard, just like Twin Buckler Dragon, except it can be used as a no-cost Perfect Guard for opponents' Vanguards with triple drive. So more or less, just like Twin Buckler, it's a Perfect Guard that can be used generally and also for no-cost strategies if you wish to use it against a specific Vanguard, particularly ones with triple drive. And with that, we just about covered the deck's Grade 1 lineup. Next, let's get on to the Grade 2 lineup. And now for the Grade 2 lineup. For the Grade 2s of this deck, we have 3 Dragon Knight Nehalims, 4 Burning Horn Dragons, 3 Gallant Flare Dragons, and 2 Steel Bullet Duststorm Ethan. The Grade 2 Dragon Knight Nehalim. Its skills are, the second skill, as a rear guard, once per turn, if your Vanguard is an Overlord, you may Soul Blast 1. If the cost has been paid, until the end of the turn, your Vanguard Overlord and the Nehalim who paid for this skill gets plus 5,000 power. So, as for Nehalim, it's a good support card for the Dragonic Overlord series, not only as a decent front row attacker, but a good way to increase your Vanguard Overlord's power for its multiple attacks. And the best part is, its skill is partially stackable, though not on its own. If you choose to play multiple copies of Nehalim in your deck, and if you manage to call multiple copies throughout your rear guard, as long as you don't mind paying a Soul Blast for each one you use, it's possible to keep on stacking and pumping the power to your Dragonic Overlord, making it more likely to hit it with its multiple attacks. So overall, Dragon Knight Nehalim, a great card for the Overlord series, with its front row attacking as well as its Soul Blast 1 plus power. The Grade 2 Burning Horn Dragon. Its skills are, the first skill, during your turn, when called onto the rearguard circle, you may Counter Blast 1. If the cost has been paid, you may check the top 7 cards of your deck for an Overlord and add it to your hand. Also, a second effect of this first skill, if no cards were added to your hand by this unit's first skill, you may countercharge 1. So for Burning Horn, its first skill is more or less a Dragonic Overlord searcher for you to either add an Overlord to your hand to either Persona Ride with, Cross Ride with, or to have any other additional cards in your hand to use for. And the best part about this first skill, it's refundable. As is mentioned in the first skill, if you fail to add any cards by this unit's first skill, so you can countercharge 1, more or less refunding for the possible failure of this skill. And the second skill of Burning Horn Dragon, as a rear guard, whenever your Vanguard Overlord attacks, it gets plus 5,000 power until the end of the turn. So for Burning Horn Dragon's second skill, it serves as a decent front row attacker for the Overlord series, since the Dragonic Overlord specializes in the restanding and attacking multiple times your Vanguard. It's possible to continue stacking more power to your rearguard Burning Horn, making it a more decent front row attacker for your Dragonic Overlord decks. The Grade 2, Gallant Flare Dragon. Its skill is, as a rearguard, you may counterblast one and move your rearguard Gallant Flare into the soul. If the cost isn't paid, you may give your Vanguard a skill. The skill is, whenever your Vanguard successfully hits your opponent's Vanguard, you may draw one card and countercharge one. So for Gallant Flare Dragon, it's a good support card for the Overlord series that specializes in restanding and attacking multiple times your Vanguard. For you see, the effect of Gallant Flare skill, when your Vanguard successfully hits your opponent's Vanguard, you can draw one and countercharge one. The effect is possibly stackable as long as you manage to land multiple hits via your Vanguard. Since the Dragonic Overlord specializes in attacking multiple times your Vanguard, as long as you manage to land enough hits on your opponent, it's possible to keep drawing more cards to refill your hand and to keep countercharging to restock on Counterblast, making Gallant Flare a pretty good card to have for the Dragonic Overlord series. The Grade 2, Steel Bullet Duststorm, Ethan. Its skill is, as a rearguard, whenever your Vanguard's attack hits, you may retreat Ethan from your rearguard. If the cost is paid, you may draw one card and countercharge one. So for Ethan, by my opinion, he's more or less like a improved version of the Great One, Dragon Monk Gojo, D standard format. Whereas Dragon Monk Gojo requires you to countercharge only after he boosts a successful attack from your Vanguard, Ethan is more flexible since his skill only says if your Vanguard's attack hits, making it more easier to not only activate Ethan's skill to let you draw and countercharge one, but to also activate multiple Ethans at a time, thus making, by my opinion, Ethan a better card to have in your deck than Dragon Monk Gojo as a countercharger. And with that, we just about covered the deck's Grade 2 lineup. Next, let's get on to the Grade 3 lineup. And now for the Grade 3 lineup. For the Grade 3s in this deck, we have 3 Dragonic Overlord, the classics, and 4 Dragonic Overlord, the ends. The Grade 3 Dragonic Overlord, the classic, one of the main Grade 3s to run in this deck. But since I've already explained this unit's skills during the Ride deck chapter of this deck build, let's just skip and get on to the next card. The Grade 3 Dragonic Overlord, the end, another one of the main Grade 3s to ride in this deck. Its skills are, the first skill, during your turn, if you have Dragonic Overlord, the classic, in your Vanguard Soul, then this unit gets plus 5,000 power and its drive check cannot be reduced. So if you choose to take the long way approach to first ride Dragonic Overlord, the classic, then cross ride to Dragonic Overlord, the end, then during your turn, the end will always have a continuous plus 5,000 power and its drive check cannot be reduced, which is one of the other costs for its restanding ability, which I'll explain now. The second skill of Dragonic Overlord, the end, as a Vanguard, once per turn, after attacking, you may counterblast one and discard 2 cards in your hand. If the cost has been paid, you can then restand your Vanguard at the cost of reducing your Vanguard's drive check by 1. So like I mentioned before with the first skill, you can stop the minus drive by having a Dragonic Overlord, the classic, in your soul, mainly by riding Overlord first, then only cross-riding the end, thus giving you at least 2 twin drive attacks with the second skill, as long as you choose to take the long approach of riding and then cross-riding later. And with that, we just about covered the deck's Grade 3 lineup. Next, let's get on to the trigger lineup. And now for the trigger lineup. For the triggers in this deck, we have 1. Dragon Deity King of Resurgence, Drag Vita, over trigger. 4. Burning Flail Dragons, critical triggers. 4. Blazing Dual Monk, Sogyo, critical triggers. 3. Flare Veil Dragons, draw triggers. 2. Stealth Fiend, Amaviras, heal triggers. And 2. Cure Flare Draco Kids, heal triggers. Grade 0, Dragon Deity, King of Resurgence, Dragvita, over trigger. Its skill is, like any other over trigger, when revealed in a drive check or damage check, by removing this card from play, you can draw 1 card and give 1 unit on your field 100 million power. But there's also an additional ability for Dragvita. When revealed during a drive check, you can also stand one of your vanguards. So this over trigger is more or less specialized for giving your Dragon Empire Vanguard an additional attack by restanding it, making it a good card to use with the Overlord series. The grade 0, Burning Flail Dragon, critical trigger. Its skill is, as a rear guard, after the battle where it boosted, you may move Burning Flail from your rear guard to your soul. If the cost has been paid, you may give 1 unit on your field plus 2000 power till the end of the turn. So with this skill, Burning Flail is a good way to not only give one of your remaining units like your Vanguard or Rearguard additional power, but to also restock your Vanguard Soul for later Soul Blast costs. The grade 0, Flare Veil Dragon, draw trigger. Its skill is, when used to guard with, if your Vanguard is at grade 3 or more, then it gets plus 5000 shield until the end of the turn. So with this draw trigger, Burning Flail can serve as a 10,000 point shield as long as you get to grade 3, making it a decent defense despite having only 5,000 base. Its skill will make it more powerful in the defensive wise. The grade 0, Stealth Fiend Amavira, heal trigger, counter heal. Its skill is, when used to guard against an attack that a unit that has attacked twice or more in the turn, she gets plus 15,000 shield until the end of the battle. So for example, if you use her to guard against a Vanguard or Rear Guard that has attacked after restanding, she becomes a 25,000 point shield, making her a good way to guard against units that specialize in restanding their Vanguards or Rear Guards. The grade 0, Cure Flare Draco Kid, heal trigger, heal Guardian. Its skill is, when used to guard against an attack whose critical was risen to 2 or more, not by base critical or drive triggers, then he gets plus 15,000 shield until the end of the battle. So for Cure Flare, he's a good way to guard against units like the Vanguard or Rear Guard that powers up its critical by skill or card effects. But like I said before, it only works against skill and card effects, meaning criticals that have risen by base critical or by drive triggers will not be counted for this skill. And with that just about covers the deck's trigger lineup. For the triggers in this deck, we have 1 over trigger, 8 critical triggers, 3 draw triggers, and 4 heal triggers. And now, after having just explained the deck's build and card effects, let's get on to explain the deck's main playstyle. So for the main playstyle of this deck, it's just you from your ride deck, ride normally from the grade 0 until grade 3 Dragonic Overlord. Then on your next turn, cross ride to the Dragonic Overlord at the end. Then for your rear guards, try to fill out and in your back row, try to secure at least 1 or at least a multiple amount of Drag Rhythm Huts. Then when it's time to attack with your Vanguard, and when you restand your Vanguard, you can use Midhat's skill to retreat himself and also draw an extra card. And if the card you discarded for a Dragonic Overlord's restand cost was in halt, you can then superior call it onto the open rearguard circle that Midhat left behind to give your Vanguard Dragonic Overlord the end another booster from the back row for its second attack. And not only that, Halt more or less gets more power from its own superior call skill. So yep, that's pretty much the main playstyle of this deck. First you ride normally, and then from Dragonic Overlord, then cross ride until Dragonic Overlord the end. Try to have at least one Drag Ritter mid-hot, primarily behind your Vanguard. Use him to boost your Vanguard's first attack. Then use the end skill to restand, and mid-hot skill to retreat himself, increase your hand size. And then make sure that when you restand your Vanguard Dragonic Overlord, the card you use to discard for its hand cost is Drag Ritter Hull. Use its skill to superior call it from the drop zone, and securing him to be a booster for your Dragonic Overlord the end's second attack. So again, fill out your field, make sure you have at least one mid-hot on your rear guard and one Halp in your hand. Use mid-hot to boost your Vanguard the end, restand it with its own skill, use a mid-hot skill to retreat him to increase your hand size, and use Halp skill to superior call him to serve as another booster from the back row. And with that, that's just about the main playstyle of this deck. And with that, I've just about pretty much covered the deck's main deck build, the card effects, and the main playstyle meant to be used with this deck. So first off, I want to say thank you to the viewers for watching today's video, and to please stay tuned for more videos I plan to upload again in the near future. I also hope you all show your support by liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing to my videos and channel. And with that, I say goodbye and see you all soon.